Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Not Overthinking. It has been a while.
Yeah, as they say in Japanese, "Hisashiburi da na."
Love it.
Means it's been a while in Japanese.
Thank you. So, how's your 2 months been?
My 2 months.
Yeah. When was the last time we did a pod?
No, it's not been 2 months, mate. It's been like 4 weeks, I think. 4 to 5 weeks.
How's your month been?
How has the month been, mate? Lots going on. Yeah, lots going on at work. We're all moving to a new flat on the weekend. It's quite cool.
We're moving to a new flat.
Yeah.
You want to fill in the viewers?
Yep.
This might actually be the last pod we record here in this location.
This is probably going to be the last location pod here on this sofa. We're moving to a new place at a different part of town. Me and the wife and the brother. You know.
It's a good thing you added that because we don't want people to leave comments talking about how
otherwise
how awful you are to your wife.
That would have been impressive.
That's not allowed here.
That would have been impressive.
So we're moving to a new place.
The three of us are sticking together, little family.
How did we decide to stick together? What was the rationale there?
What was the process? I feel like it just came up like randomly. Like we were all in St. Albans and we were talking about like all finding new places, and then someone was just like, "Wait, why don't we just stick together?" Or something?
Yeah, I think I suggested it.
Yeah. Did you?
Yeah. Because I was thinking, like, I was looking for, we were sort of discussing what sort of budgets we're looking for.
Yeah.
And I was looking for a place, and we were looking for a place for the business. And I was like, do I want to be in, do I want to get a place and have an extra 2 bedrooms for the business stuff? And then I was like, wait a minute. If I've got some rent to pay, and the business does, and you guys do, what if we clobber all 3 together and get an absolutely sick place?
Yeah, pull it all together.
Yeah,
so I think that has been quite good. Yeah. So, yeah, we're moving on the weekend. What else has been going on?
Interestingly, so I had dinner with a friend of ours the other day who also has a sibling, and she and the husband and the sibling and the sibling's husband all live in New York, and she mentioned that we didn't even think about living together. You know, they're all living in broadly the same area of New York, and I was like, yeah, why not? That seems a bit weird. You guys are siblings, you're married. Yeah. Why not live together? And she was like, in fairness, you're doing the more weird thing. So I feel like you're the one who needs to justify why you're living with your brother and his wife.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Like that is actively weird. And I was like, okay, fair enough. Well,
yeah, I think like I can imagine. I mean, these friends are all like a few years into being married and stuff like that. Yeah, like, I think it might have been a bit more weird if like you didn't know Lucia or something. If it was like I got married to someone you don't know that well, and then like you were like, hey, can I share a flat with you guys? Or I was like, hey, babe, can my brother share a flat with us? That would be a bit weird. But I think given that, like, we all know each other and stuff, I think that does change the equation. And given that, like, you and Lucy have been housemates for a while, that also changes the equation. So, yeah, I think, like, it's weird if you hear the surface level facts, but it's nuanced.
Yeah, I guess back when I used to say that I live with my brother's girlfriend, people would also think that's a bit weird.
Yeah.
When you hear the surface level facts.
Right, yeah.
But with a bit of context, it all clears right up.
Yes, that's what's been going on. What have you been up to? You had some kind of retreat last weekend?
Yeah, I went to this Effective Altruism Longview Philanthropy retreat, which was great.
What does that mean, all of that? Oh, we know what effective altruism means.
Do we?
Well, we should by now, listeners.
Yes, otherwise known as spreadsheet philanthropy, some might say.
So what's this Longview whatever?
So Longview Philanthropy is an organization that I think advises foundations and people who are giving money to charities on where they can best use that money to impact like the long-term future broadly. So I think some of the stuff that there were three or four kind of big topic areas in this long-termism stuff. Broadly, long-termism is the idea that we ought to consider the lives of people that are living in the future with some degree of worth. And broadly 4 topic areas that we talked a lot about on the retreat were, number 1, artificial intelligence and the risks of artificial general intelligence, otherwise known as AGI. Secondly, nuclear, the risks of nuclear. We've had nuclear weapons now for 77 years. And in all that time, other than Hiroshima and Nagasaki, we haven't really seen their destruction. But since then, their destructive power has increased like stupidly large amounts. There are 6 or so nations around the world that have the power to start a nuclear war, which could literally cause extinction of the human race. And we keep on threatening to use the bombs.
Yeah. I think Putin did that today.
Oh, was it today? Damn.
I think so, like yesterday or something.
Somewhat not up to date with the news. Yeah, it's pretty scary shit, man. It's like, we've had these weapons for ages. We keep on threatening to use them. And like, if this doesn't stop, eventually someone will use them. And I'm listening to a book at the moment, which was on the recommendation of someone I met at the retreat who has been working in nuclear policy for like 3 decades. It's called The Bomb. And it's about like the history of nuclear weapons and warfare and stuff from like the 1960s onwards, and like what happened with the Cubans, what happened with in the Cold War, what happened with like Pakistan and India getting nuclear power, what happened with North Korea, and what the hell was going on there. And it's just an incredibly interesting story of like politics and bureaucracy and like the US Air Force versus the Navy versus the Army versus the Marines and all the sort of politics going on in between them that caused all of this stuff to end up in a nuclear arms race with the Soviets and the US. So nuclear is another big category where it's like, shit, this is a serious thing which is generally under sort of somewhat neglected by people. So we've got AI, we've got nuclear, we have biosecurity, which is sort of engineered pandemics being like a potentially big area of threat, where as the technology for quote gain of function, so being able to engineer viruses and stuff gets better and cheaper and stuff over time, the risk that a random dude who would have otherwise been a school shooter deciding to create a bioweapon massively increases, even outside of nation states doing that. And number 4 was moral value lock-in, which is some stuff around like retaining.
Okay, so what was the purpose of this retreat?
It was basically to get about like somewhere between 50 and 100 people together who are all somewhat related to who are either working in philanthropy or working within like effective altruism stuff, or who run foundations or deal with funding decisions, or media people, which is why me and a couple of other YouTubers were there and some journalist type people.
Right.
So it was great vibes, like fantastic place.
Wow, nice.
Very inspiring.
Whereabouts was it?
It was in Ascot, which is near Heathrow Airport.
Ascot,
yeah. I dropped Nani off at Heathrow and it was like, it's gonna be a 2-hour drive, and it was like a 15-minute drive.
Oh, really?
I was like sick.
So
It was great. Hung out with our pal William McCaskill while we were there. Yeah, just great vibes all around. Made some friends, made some contact.
Are you more like worried about the long-term future now?
I am more worried about the long-term future now.
Really?
But I think it's like, worry is a strong word, but I think there's also reasons to be optimistic, reasons to be cheerful, because there's people working on this stuff, and it was genuinely I think before getting into this stuff, thanks to our friend Lucia, I would have regarded philanthropy with a bit of skepticism of like, what's really going on here?
Yeah, what are they really up to?
And I would have bought into the whole sort of, the Gates Foundation is corrupt because really when they're trying to encourage agriculture, it's because he's a landowner. And it's like, clearly there's some ulterior motive at play here. And like meeting people who are actually in charge of kind of billions of dollars of funding and stuff. It's just like really nice and sincere and genuinely want to make the world a better place.
Yeah.
And that, like, it really got that whole wholesome, nice vibes
through. So you're a bit less like cynical about the whole thing.
Yeah. So that was good.
That's cool.
And we're currently in the midst of a batch podcast recording week for the Deep Dive podcast.
What's a batch week?
So I did 4 interviews on Monday, 3 yesterday, 2 today.
Wow.
Yeah, no, it's been solid.
Is that like fun? Do you not like lose the energy or whatever? Or
no, it's actually really
repetitive?
Fun. It's really fun. Yeah, I think even like 3 in a day, it's like having breakfast, lunch, and dinner with someone, where I'm not doing much of the talking. I'm letting them talk, and I'm just asking the questions I'm interested in. So it was sick. I think made a few new friends as well that I'm trying to be more like intentional about keeping in touch with and stuff.
Yeah,
just great vibes all around, mate.
Mate, nice one.
Yeah.
Sounds like you've been having a blast. Not recording, not overthinking.
Absolutely. Feeling very content.
Sick.
Yeah. How are you feeling broadly? Contentment levels.
I think there's 1 to 2 work things that currently are perturbing my inner state. But they'll be sorted out by the end of the week.
What genre of thing are they?
Oh, just like a kind of high stakes thing going on, and just gotta do it. Just gotta bite the bullet, pull the trigger,
Excellent.
pull the plug.
Pull the plug.
No, I don't know what the connotation is. Pull the plug.
Pull the plug implies firing someone or cancelling a project.
No, there's no plug pulling. There's no
trigger pulling.
There's
no pulling of the plug.
there's no plugs being pulled. So yeah, just some pretty standard work stuff. But this week I've had two. I said this morning and yesterday morning I had like breakfast. I feel like breakfast meetings with people where, it's like work adjacent. Yeah, I'd say like work adjacent breakfast meetings are a great way to start the day because it
gets you out of bed.
It gets you out of bed. It's like fun. It's usually energizing hanging out with someone, and it's work adjacent. So like it's fun, but also like it's getting you more motivated to like do work somehow. Yeah,
to continue the capitalist machine.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas I think if like for example, like a pure social breakfast, I think it would be fun. It would maybe be energizing and just on a social level. But once like an hour is up, it'd be like, oh damn, I wish I could continue hanging out with my mate. Whereas I think with a work adjacent breakfast, it's like, once the hour is up, like you both know you want to kind of start the work day, and you've been talking about work adjacent things and maybe even work things, and so you're like pumped about it. So it's great.
If one were to be a fly on the wall for one of these, like what does an archetypal breakfast work adjacent conversation look like?
Yeah, so this morning I met another founder who is in town from Spain for a few days. Their product is also like a data type of product. They're a causal user, and so they kind of just hit me up, and just kind of hearing the story, seeing a demo of their product, just like talking shop basically. Yesterday I met a guy who was a previous colleague back when I had a real job, and we've kind of stayed in touch, and now he's actually joined a company that I used to work at, and just like these kinds of things where it's like, oh cool, how do you know this person, how do you get connected, you hear about their experience with this other thing, and then like chat about like what's going on at your company, and like just like shoot the shit. It's great.
Yeah, fair play.
Yeah.
You had some Twitter drama to share.
Oh yeah,
basically. What's going on?
Yeah, so
we should have a segment in the podcast when we start doing it with more regularity of like current affairs, but through twitter.com. Like what's new in the meme dealership?
What are people memeing about? Yeah. So basically, what seems to have gone down in the past couple of days is that Adam Levine,
the singer of Maroon 5.
Yeah, the lead singer of Maroon 5. He some Instagram, a woman came out and did a TikTok video about like DMs that Adam Levine had sent her. I think she's like she's some kind of model, maybe something to that effect. I don't know exactly how it unfolded, but basically, oh yeah, I think she privately shared some she probably showed like some trusted friends like, oh hey, you wouldn't believe who's sliding into my DMs, and then one of her friends sold that knowledge to the tabloids, and so then she basically like came out and was like, look, it's basically already out there. Here's the sitch. Here are the DMs. This is what this was the situation, etc. This is how I feel about it.
So Adam Levine is messaging random models on Instagram. Like
I don't know how long ago this was.
What is bad about this?
He's a married man with a few kids.
Oh, right.
So I think that's what most people aren't thrilled about. So yeah. Anyway, so this one woman came out with like the screenshots, and there's like two like interesting screenshots that she shared.
Okay.
Of like
what do they
DMs.
say? Like.
I mean, look, it's not the most savory of stuff, but like I'll read out a meme of it off of Twitter. You'll get the gist. I'm not sure I like super want to like repeat this or even like spread the story or something, but basically sliding into some DMs, and the DMs are now coming out.
Fine.
Whenever like famous people are like, when these reveals happen, I always think like, if you're a famous person, why would you even like
why would you DM anyone? Yeah.
Like, why would you DM a random person? Like, how would this not blow up in your face? It's mental. Okay, so what people have been doing is they've been taking like a snippet from the DMs and recaptioning it.
Okay,
you know,
fine.
recapturing it. All right, so this DM says, this is like 2 messages. It says, it is truly unreal how effing hot you are. Next message, like, it blows my mind. Okay, so that's the DM.
So that's a DM that Adam Levine sent to random
some
woman. Okay,
some like,
and that's not fake.
babe on Instagram. That's not fake.
Okay.
And now someone has captioned this. It is truly unreal how effing hot you are. Like, blah, blah. Someone captioned this: Goldilocks trying the first bowl of porridge. It's just pretty funny. It's just, you know, the juxtaposition and all that. You know, blah blah blah. Anyway, that was kind of a funny thing I wanted to share.
No, have you got any more memes that are like this?
Yeah,
Or are they somewhat unsavory?
I don't know how I feel about even like talking about this story on the pod. I don't. Yeah, it's not to be shared. You know, for the wife and the kids. Again, this is not a good situation for basically everyone involved.
Isn't your Instagram account being a meme dealer?
It is, but like, it's mostly tweets. Yeah, I think this kind of stuff, like, look, it's entertaining, but yeah, I don't know. I feel a bit weird about like sharing this.
Oh, okay, so you would have drawn the line about sharing memes about like Matt Hancock back when that was a thing.
Maybe, yeah. I'm not sure how I would have felt about that.
What about the Queen?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The Queen. Yeah, the Queen passed away in the past few weeks, didn't she?
She did.
Yeah.
Is the queue still a thing, or have they closed the queue now? Who knows?
Yeah, I was surprised at how upset I was about it. I thought I wouldn't really care. I had a little cry about it on the evening.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I wish I'd gone to Buckingham Palace that evening. Just stayed in, had a chill one, watched the live stream, and watched Lost. But I wish I'd like gone out there and like been part of the people. You know. Yeah.
Feels like a once in a lifetime.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I was actually pretty gutted about that. Yeah, with regards to memes about the Queen, I think on the day. Look, I've definitely liked 1 or 2 things. Okay, over the past 2 weeks,
you've liked 1 or 2 things.
Yes.
So that's things that
Twitter.
So things that you have felt sufficiently like it's socially acceptable to like.
Look, I found lots of things funny. I haven't liked them.
Okay.
And actually, someone did a really funny tweet. Like, I think the evening it happened, someone tweeted, "Lord, please forgive me for the tweets I'm about to like in the next couple of days," or something. Look, there's been funny jokes about it. There have been funny jokes about it, for sure. But yeah, I was pretty gutted about it, actually. Yeah. Anyway, look, we better get to the meat of the pod.
What are we talking about?
Last time we were going through some highlights from the rise and triumph of the modern self.
Were we?
I was thinking today we can continue that.
Feels like such a long time ago.
Yeah.
Okay, can you remind me what is the thesis of the rise and triumph of the modern self? Oh no, in fact, don't remind me. I seem to remember we took a whole episode just to discuss the preface or the foreword or something like that.
No, that was just a dinner we had with some other people.
Oh, was it?
I'll highlight for another book. Yeah, the goal of the book, he basically makes this point of like, look, the narratives are at a point where if someone says, "I'm a man trapped in a woman's body," this is a thing that makes sense to people. This is a thing that people support. This is a thing that people like, you know, promote, whatever it might be, and
rightly so.
And even like 20 years ago. Like 10 to 20 years ago, maybe even like 5 to 10 years ago, like the mainstream public's view on these things would have been very different. And if you go back like 2 generations, if you go back to this guy's granddad, he thinks like my granddad would not understand that, like this statement just wouldn't make sense to my granddad. And so like how has culture evolved so rapidly that we can like people today hold like very different viewpoints on quite big like far things with quite big far-reaching implications. People today hold very, very different viewpoints than they would have held like 5 to 10 to 20 years ago. It's a very rapid cultural shift. And how has the psyche evolved from like our generation, from our like grandparents' generation to our generation, where there is just a massive rift in terms of like how we view like selfhood and identity and things like this. All right, so that was kind of what we're talking about. And so I think where we ended things last time is that like we kind of touched on this idea that we're now in the era of psychological man. There's a lot of inner psychologizing of like, you know, how am I feeling, like
feelings of facts.
Yeah, feelings of facts kinds of vibes, and like this is how our minds operate.
Yeah,
like,
and you can commit a crime against someone by kind of hurting their sense of self.
Yeah, like sense of self is a sense of self comes from within, and like, true authenticity comes purely from within, and outside forces that might sort of, not support that, or like outside forces that might, outside views that might like contradict this like internally generated sense of self, are like, bad, basically. Like how, that's kind of what we mean by psychological man. And so, right. So let's get the highlights. So yeah, just to add like one more summary thing. The whole thing about the book is like, look, the seeds and like all the groundwork had been laid over the past 200 years that allowed this like rapid shift of the past 20 years to happen. It's not like it just like sprouted overnight, like 20 years ago or whatever. Like the groundwork had been being laid for a very long time. Okay, cool. Okay, so he talks about, he kind of talks about like various like philosophers and thinkers and psychology, all the various like intellectual contributions that led to where we are. Okay, so he makes a link to a guy called Hegel, German philosopher, 19th century. One of like the core points that Hegel makes is that a human being is most self-conscious when she knows that other people are acknowledging her as a self-conscious being.
So he's self-conscious as in conscious of the self, or like self-conscious as in sort of the anxious seat definition?
Not so much the anxious seat, no, not so much the anxiety definition, but just like the awareness that other people are like perceiving you.
Okay.
Like we pay more attention to who we are, and like our identity and how we view ourselves when we know that other people are perceiving us in some way. And so other people acknowledging us as like self-conscious beings. So here's kind of an example they give. So children often play improvised team sports in the schoolyard during recess. Typically team captains, normally a couple of the stronger leadership types in the playground pecking order, taking in turns to select players for their team. The moment of being selected often gives the one chosen a thrill, a feeling of excitement, of a satisfaction, and perhaps more negatively, of superiority relative to those who have not yet been picked. That is a moment of being recognized, of being acknowledged as valuable by another, and crucially, of knowing oneself that one has been so acknowledged. One imagines that this experience is somewhat different from that of, say, a Jack Russell Terrier whose master comes home after work and calls him to sit on his lap. So, like, this idea of like acknowledgement from the outside world and this feeling of being acknowledged, recognized, valued, or whatever, is basically just using this like playground example as like, hey, this is like quintessentially what this feeling is. It's like you're on the playground and you're picked on the team before someone else. You're being acknowledged, valued, etc. And like this is different to like a dog whose like master like calls him to sit down or whatever. Like the dog might be happy. Like he says, the Jack Russell may well be thrilled by the return of his master and by the fact that he's been acknowledged or recognized in this way. But unlike the child picked for the playground team, he will lack the self-consciousness necessary to reflect on the fact that he has been acknowledged.
Okay.
Cool.
That sounds pretty reasonable.
Yeah.
So this is what Hegel said.
Oh yeah, Hegel kind of talked a lot about this kind of stuff, and so like this is being one's authentic, what one sees as one's like authentic self. This thing being validated by the external world is now how we think about dignity.
Oh, okay. What do you mean?
Like for someone to have dignity
is for that person to feel validated by the external world.
It is for that person what that person feels is their authentic self to be validated by the external world. And ultimately for the psychological man, or the expressive individualism is kind of the term we used last time of like. So for the expressive individual to receive recognition means that the assumptions of expressive individualism must be the assumptions of society as a whole. For the individual to be king, society must recognize the supreme value of the individual. And so like the importance of like the dignity of the individual being like the paramount thing. Yeah, so I think he is kind of talking about like the shift that society has gone through from being what he says honor-based, like based on the notion of honor, to one being based on the notion of dignity. And in like the honor-based society, there is some like normative social hierarchy that everyone agrees on. Even if you're not high up on it, like you still like there's a normative social hierarchy. Now we don't really have a normative social hierarchy. And like society kind of recognizes the supreme value of the individual.
Okay.
All right, we'll jump to the next one. Yeah, so then he talks a lot about. He talks about, okay, like, look, this is all well and good. Okay, like, fine, granted, right? Individual is really important. Like, our like sense of self is really important to us, and like, you know, we want the acknowledgement of other people and the validation of other people to validate and acknowledge this like sense of self, right? Like, we want to be picked on the playground, kind of thing. Like, we want to be like acknowledged, like for who we think we are, and whatever it might be. Now. Next, he asked the question of like, okay, fine. You know, expressive individualism, psychological man, this is who we are. We're expressively individualistic, and we are psychological man. But why does our culture have the shape that it does? And in particular, why is sex like the linchpin of all of this stuff?
Ooh, okay.
So I'll read it. Why does our social imaginary, meaning like just like the narratives that we're all swimming in, whether we're aware of them or not, why does our social imaginary make sex such a basic marker of identity and attitudes to sex such a fundamental test for recognition? Why does the public apparently need to know the sexual orientation of movie stars or their attitude to gay marriage when neither are particularly relevant to their technical competence to pursue their profession? Why is it so important to educate even elementary school children in the taxonomy of sexual preferences? It has not always been that way.
Okay.
So he's kind of asking like, okay, look, all about this like expressive individual stuff, but like, why is sex such a big deal as part of this? Right.
Okay. I mean, you could say because it's a pretty big part of people's lives.
Well, I think he's saying like it being a pretty big part of people's identity is like a very new phenomenon, basically. Like historically, there's not like been so crucial.
Would it be reasonable to say, like, I feel like, you know, race is a pretty big part of people's identities these days, in a way that it might not have been in the past. But as society recognizes the oppression that has been done to and continues to be done to certain minorities, for example, on race grounds, or on sexual orientation grounds, or on gender or sex grounds, then those things feel like, more of a badge of identity. Like, for example, if you went to Pakistan, most people probably wouldn't have Muslim as part of their identity, like, or be particularly like kind of peddling of that because everyone is Muslim broadly. Yeah. If you have Christian as in Pakistan, then you know that would be a clear part of your identity.
Yeah.
But a lot of people, when moving to the UK, now they're like, oh, I need to hold even stronger to this identity because I am a minority in this space.
Right. Yeah.
I'm feeling some sense of oppression potentially. Therefore, I am Muslim. Like, it's a core part of who I am. I'm Pakistani, etc., etc. Could that be a reasonable explanation as to why sex and sexual orientation, also sexual orientation and gender identity and stuff, are now coming to the forefront because we are recognizing that, oh, damn, people have been oppressed in this grounds for a while. Yeah, maybe we should do something about this.
Potentially. Let me think about that for a sec. I'm just trying to remember like the context of what he's saying and what he has said in this stuff. Yeah, I think that definitely makes sense. But like, you know, the question that he like starts off the book with, which is around like, how does why does the phrase like, I'm a man in a woman's body, like, why does this like, why do we make sense of this now where we didn't before? Like, I think it's, what you're basically saying is like, look, if like some minority group has been oppressed for some time, then like, it seems natural that the axis along which they've been oppressed will be a big part of their identity and will matter to them. That's all well and good. I think he's talking about the shift in all of us, right? Of like this sort of inner psychologizing and the way we all shape our identities has changed. Not just like oppressed groups, but really everyone. The way we all like think about our identities has changed from being like outwards onto us to being like inwards out kind of thing, as in like we are who we feel we are who we think we are, and like it's kind of coming from ourselves. I think that's kind of the big change that he's saying. And then I think the other thing is that like when we say like oppressed group, right? There's a question of like, okay, how are you grouping people? Like what categories are you even putting people in order to like oppress them or in order to treat them differently?
Sure.
And the categories that we have for us, like if you think about all the various labels you associate with yourself now, and if you imagine someone like 400 years ago, they would have very different categories for grouping people. And like the categories that we think about have changed quite a lot. And like, sexual identity, gender identity is now, and the way we view that is like now very, very different than like how people would have viewed their identity like, 400 years ago.
So 400 years ago it might have been a baker or apprentice blacksmith.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what it had been 400 years ago. Okay. But for example, like probably like let's say you were attracted to men and women.
Yep.
Probably like the idea of like I am bisexual and this is like a really core part of who I am, and this is like probably the way you would have viewed that, your thoughts and feelings about that would have been quite different than today, because like the sort of sexual identity and gender identity component is like we think about that in a very different way.
Okay.
This is a book I've probably read like 5% of it, and I've been meaning to get through it. It's a book called After Virtue by a guy called Alistair McIntyre. This book is apparently like the biggest deal in moral philosophy in like the last 100 years or something.
Oh, okay.
It's about this idea of emotivism. And like I don't have like a really deep understanding, but the general sense is that like basically we're kind of at like a point in sort of moral discourse where everything ultimately amounts to I think this is right because I feel like it is right. Yeah, let me see if I can find a highlight from After Virtue about this. Okay, no, there's probably a better summary of emotivism in this chapter. McIntyre's view is that a moral philosophy characteristically presupposes a sociology. Right? This means that ethical discourse arises out of and assumes a set of beliefs about the nature of the society in which it occurs. And his view is that, put simply, this is about like Alistair McIntyre's view. Put simply, modern ethical discourse is chaotic because there is no longer a strong community consensus on the nature of the proper ends of human existence. Ends meaning like purposes. If morality is a function of the social conventions of the community, and yet the community lacks consensus on those social conventions, or those social conventions are hotly contested, ethical chaos is the result. We should be clear that making ethics a matter of community conventions does not necessarily demand moral relativism. Those community conventions could, in theory, be rooted in universal realities, such as natural law, but it does point to the need for the community to agree on its conventions in order for meaningful moral discussion and decision-making to take place. And then McIntyre, if, as McIntyre claims, every set of moral values presupposes a set of social assumptions, then what are the major social assumptions that he sees as dominant in the West? The key one for McIntyre is what he calls emotivism. And I think like in his book After Virtue, like he basically makes this claim that like we are in an emotivist society, right? And he defines it as follows: emotivism is the doctrine. It's quite like a bold claim. Like it would be surprising for someone to hear this. Emotivism is the doctrine that all evaluative judgments, and more specifically, all moral judgments, are nothing but expressions of preference, expressions of attitude or feeling, insofar as they are moral or evaluative in character. Like basically, if someone makes any kind of evaluative judgment or moral judgment nowadays, at its root, like if you follow the argument or whatever, like at its root, no one has any shared foundation they can appeal to. What everything will amount to is just like, hey, this is a personal feeling of mine. There is no shared like grounding on which we can all agree. There is just like feelings. The language of morality as it's now used is really nothing more than the language of personal preference based on individual sentiments and feelings. And this is like McIntyre's like key thing. His observation is that emotivism is the theory not of meaning but of use. It is about how we use moral concepts and moral language. Emotivism, and i.e. like the language we use for morality nowadays, it's a way of granting our personal feelings about stuff to be some kind of like objective authority. Okay, look, we should probably stop soon, but the way he starts this book is like really sick. Like when I read chapter 1 of this book, it's probably like a couple of years ago now, it was just so good. All right, so we're gonna end this chapter just like setting the scene about emotivism and like what does this mean to say that like, look, ultimately all moral discourse today amounts to like, I feel this and that's why this is correct. All right, so I'm reading chapter 1. We're now switching to After Virtue by Alistair McIntyre. Imagine that the natural sciences were to suffer the effects of a catastrophe. A series of environmental disasters are blamed by the general public on the scientists. Widespread riots occur, laboratories are burnt down, physicists are lynched, books and instruments are destroyed. Finally, a political movement called Know Nothing takes power.
Know Nothing.
Know Nothing. Like,
as in KNOW.
Yeah, Know Nothing, yeah.
Okay.
Finally, a Know Nothing political movement takes power and successfully abolishes science teaching in schools and universities, imprisoning and executing the remaining scientists. They're trying to do away with science. They're not happy with science. There were some environmental disasters and it's all being blamed on science, right? And now people are like down with science, right? Later still, there is a reaction against this destructive movement, and enlightened people seek to revive science, although they have largely forgotten what it is. So basically, this movement succeeds. It's like, science was responsible for these natural disasters. We're going to like kill all the scientists, burn all the books. We're going to like get rid of any evidence of science, okay?
Right.
And they largely succeed, right, in this hypothetical world, right? So after that, there's a reaction against this movement, which is a bunch of enlightened people seeking to revive science, although they've largely forgotten what it was. So that they're trying to like, they know that science used to be this thing. These people got rid of it. We should try and bring it back. And so that they're now like trying to piece together science, right? And so, but all they possess are fragments, a knowledge of experiments detached from any knowledge of the theoretical context which gave them significance. They have parts of theories unrelated either to the other bits and pieces of theory which they possess or to experiment. They have instruments whose use has been forgotten. They have half chapters from books, single pages from articles, not always fully legible, torn, charred, stuff like this. Nonetheless, all these fragments are re-embodied in a set of practices which go under the revived names of physics, chemistry, and biology. Okay, so they've like found fragments of like what science, of like evidence of science and experiments and books and things like that. They've pieced it together and they're like, all right, these ones are the biology ones, these are the chemistry ones, these are the physics ones, right? Adults argue with each other about the respective merits of relativity theory, evolutionary theory, and phlogiston theory, although they possess only a very partial knowledge of each. Children learn by heart the surviving portions of the periodic table and recite as incantations some of the theorems of Euclid, mathematician, geometer. Nobody, or almost nobody, realizes that what they are doing is not natural science in any proper sense at all. For everything that they do and say conforms to certain canons of consistency and coherence, and those contexts which would be needed to make sense of what they're doing have been lost, perhaps irretrievably. So they're kind of like, they're kind of like doing these things involving scientific artifacts, but they're not like doing science in any proper sense of the word. Right? In such a culture, men would use expressions such as neutrino, mass, specific gravity, atomic weight, in systematic and often interrelated ways, which would resemble in lesser or greater degrees the ways in which such expressions had been used in earlier times before scientific knowledge had largely been lost. In such a culture, men would use all these different technical terms, in lesser or greater degrees in which, in the ways that they were used before the scientific knowledge had been lost. But many of the beliefs presupposed by the use of these expressions would have been lost, and there would appear to be an element of arbitrariness and even of choice in their application, which would appear very surprising to us. So like, they might be using the term like neutrino without really understanding like the concept of neutrino depends on, like, you know what, like, etc. What would appear to be rival and competing premises for which no further argument could be given would abound. Yeah, there'll be lots of like competing premises where like you can't really get into a reasonable or productive discussion or argument about it. It's just like, this is my premise, this is your premise. Can't do anything about it.
Can I just say something?
What?
You gesticulating with the microphone is very strange to listen to when people are listening to on audio.
Fine. Yeah, I would.
So please attempt to be a little bit more static with the microphone.
I'll carry on reading. Subjectivist theories of science would appear and would be criticized by those who held that the notion of truth embodied in what they took to be science was incompatible with subjectivism. You know, some people would say like, the science stuff is subjective. Other people would be like, no, science is like, the subjectivism is not compatible with science. Like, science is about like objective truth, whatever. This imaginary possible world is very like one that some science fiction writers have constructed. We may describe it as a world in which the language of natural science, or parts of it at least, continues to be used, but is in a grave state of disorder. We may notice that if in this imaginary world, analytical philosophy were to flourish, it would never reveal the fact of this disorder. For the techniques of this is quite important to us. If we were in this world, this post science revival world where like we've like lost most of what we know about science and we've pieced together other fragments and now we're like trying to like do science. Now he says in this world, if in this imaginary world analytical philosophy were to flourish, it would never reveal the fact of this disorder. For the techniques of analytical philosophy are essentially descriptive of the language of the present at that. The analytical philosopher would be able to elucidate the conceptual structures of what was taken to be scientific thinking and discourse in the imaginary world in precisely the way that he elucidates the conceptual structures of natural science as it is. We're in this world, we've lost the true like roots, the true foundations, the true substance of like all this science type stuff. We don't know that we've lost it because it's been lost. We have fragments of it that we've now pieced together. The point he's making is that like, if you were like a genius philosopher in this world, because of like what we have access to, in like analytic philosophy, you wouldn't actually, there would be no way for you to reach the conclusion that actually there was this real world of science beforehand. We now have the fragments because all you can look at is the fragments. There's no way to arrive at the conclusion that actually like with the meat of this, we've actually lost the meat of this stuff and this isn't real. He says, nor again would phenomenology or existentialism be able to discern anything wrong. All the structures of intentionality would be what they are now. The task of supplying an epistemological basis for these false simulacra of natural science would not differ in phenomenological terms from the task as it is presently envisaged. I don't really know what phenomenology...
I have no idea what that sentence meant.
Okay, but basically I think you get...
a lot of this shit is going way over my head.
Okay, I think you get the general concept, which is like, look, we had the world in which like we know how to do science.
Fine.
We know how to run experiments. We know the point of this stuff. Like we're trying to like learn more about the natural world, right? That world was there.
Now we've just got like scraps and tatters and fragments and stuff.
Now we've got like a Bunsen burner here. We've got a few pages from some book there. We've got some like insight in some like science dictionary, and we're like trying to piece together like what science is.
Okay.
And like we think we're doing it, and like we,
because we're using the right words.
Because we're using scientific words and things like that, and like, we've kind of grouped things in the right groupings of like, oh, these are race biology, whatever, right?
Okay.
If all you can do is analyze the pieces in front of you, you'd never reach the conclusion
that they were once part of a bigger whole.
And that like your arrangement of the pieces actually doesn't really make any sense or something.
Fine.
And so now he's saying, what is the point of constructing this imaginary world inhabited by fictitious pseudoscientists and real genuine philosophy? This is a key highlight from this book. The hypothesis which I wish to advance is that in the actual world which we inhabit today, the language of morality is in the same state of grave disorder as the language of natural science was in the imaginary world. What we possess, if this view is true, are the fragments of a conceptual scheme, parts which now lack those contexts from which their significance derived. We possess indeed simulacra of morality. We continue to use many of the key expressions, but we have very largely, if not entirely, lost our comprehension, both theoretical and practical, of morality. So he's basically setting up this kind of world of like, imagine like science got destroyed and we had like fragments and words remaining, and then we were like going about.
So you're saying that like similarly, morality as a concept has been
the language of morality that we use today is like he feels like he's saying is at a similar point.
Okay,
where
I can say like incest is bad because and I've got some like words that I can string together, but really back in the day in a hypothetical world, there would have been a whole like foundational basis for why incest is bad.
I think so, something like that. I haven't got to the end of the book, but okay. the point he makes in the book
that's a good way of saying you've read 5% of it.
Huh?
That's a good way of saying you've read 5% of the book.
I did say I read 5% of the book.
But you just said I haven't gotten to the end of the book.
Oh right, yeah.
Like it's very generous of you.
No, but this is quite important because like the point that he does make is that like the emotivism, which is kind of the state that we're in now, where like any if anyone tries to make like a moral claim or a moral argument, at its core, the argument is this is right because I feel like it is right.
Okay.
That's the place he feels like we're at.
Is it like back in the day we used to have a source of quote objective morality, which is this is right because the book says so, whereas now we don't believe in the book anymore, and therefore we're saying
he's trying to. So in general, he's trying to bring about some kind of a revival of, or it's like make a case for a return to something more like virtue ethics, where we can all agree on certain things. We can all agree that like courage is virtuous. We can all agree that this thing is virtuous. That this other thing is like dishonorable.
Yeah.
Like again, I haven't read the book, but basically, that's kind of I think that's kind of the general gist of the point that Alistair McIntyre is making of like, hey, we're kind of at this interminable point when it comes to moral discourse, where there is no way for two people to like really, you just have a bunch of people with competing premises, and there's no way to like dig down and like tease them apart or like say why one is actually right and one is actually wrong, this kind of stuff. Yes. Anyway, so just to kind of jump back before we end, I thought this was like I thought it was like a really profound like setup to the book of like presenting this imaginary world and getting you to kind of understand like, oh yeah, that's pretty weird, and he's like, boom, you're in the world, bitch, kind of thing.
Love it. Now that's what you took away from the book.
Anyway, so where we'll stop is the Rise and Triumph of Modern Self, talking about emotivism and its link to all of this kind of stuff. And I think like you can sort of see kind of links about like feelings being like the facts, and like everything ultimately being like how someone feels, and you can't really go any deeper than that, or like have discourse on any different level than that. Yeah, so I think we should end it there. Maybe I'll do some pre-reading for the next, because I think this emotivism thing is like quite interesting. It is a bit like academic, but like,
I feel like you need to do a bunch of reading on this so you can explain it like I'm 5.
I don't
like
think
about 80% of what you said went over my head.
I don't think I can explain it that well right now. Okay, so let me over the next week I will revisit some of these pages.
Sweet.
And then I think like introducing emotivism to the pod and how it links to this guy's Rise and Triumph of Modern Self.
I love it.
Pretty good.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for listening. Maybe we'll see you next week. Hopefully. Fingers crossed. We will see you next time. Hopefully.